Welcome back, everyone, to Entrepreneuring. I'm Garrett Weinzierl, and my guest today is the owner and operator of ClassyCrow.com. Welcome, Stephen Dye.
Hello.
Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Doing all right this morning?
I almost overslept, but I made it here, so that's good.
keeping in artist tradition, it sounds like.
Yeah, I'm a horrible, irresponsible person.
So you're an illustrator and an artist, and over at ClassyCrow.com, folks can find prints and graphic tee designs. Mm-hmm. So hence the artist joke at the top. So if folks out there are familiar with me in any way, shape, or form, I also have a background in art and went to school for it. So I feel like we're going to geek out a little bit, maybe about art school and art in general today. So it should be fun.
I'd be happy with that.
Awesome. So I guess let's take it back to the pseudo beginning. Art is something just about everyone, at least in the U.S., is exposed to at a young age. Everyone's given crayons or a pencil and told to go entertain themselves as a child. But a lot of us don't keep up with it. At what point did you realize that you wanted to pursue art professionally?
I don't know. So I was probably a sophomore in college, and I was getting to the point where I had to declare a major, and I took like an engineering, it was an intro to engineering class. I took some philosophy classes. I don't know. I was just testing the waters, and I kind of realized that I wasn't like any of my classmates in the mechanical engineering class. They were all gearheads and looking at magazines about cars, and I realized I don't care about cars and gear ratios, and then I had a friend he was getting his master's in business, and I thought, well, maybe I could be, and it's funny that I find myself trying to do this now, but I don't know, I just felt like I don't want to do any of those things, and I've always been good at art, and if I'm going to be successful anywhere, then it's probably going to be there. And so I just made the decision to be an artist. And I didn't really understand what that meant until much later, but it seemed like a good idea at the time.
Well, that's great. So is it just always kind of been something you've done? Have you just had, pencil to paper your whole life?
Yeah, I'm not like I know a lot of artists are into self-expression. That's kind of why they do it. But I've always been interested in kind of the social component of it. When I was in elementary school, there's this one girl, and I drew her a monster for her birthday, and there's this another girl, and I made her like Dalmatian puppy dogs out of paper, and so I think I always really liked what I could do with it and how it helped me to interact with other people, and so I think because of that, a lot of my art is a little bit humorous, I think, because I want to make people happy, and it's all about interaction with other people. It's not so much the self-expressive, it's more of I get to connect with people this way, and I guess in a way that's expression. But yeah, so I've always been pretty good at it, and yeah, it's. Now that I'm a professional, it's kind of scary, but yeah, I guess I have a piece of paper that says I'm a professional.
Yeah, it's interesting to flip that switch, right? Because I had a very similar feeling when I was going through art school. It's like, well, I've always done this. Now I have a piece of paper that says this is what I do.
Yeah, I had a panic attack probably in my second senior year. And I realized when I graduate, I'm supposedly going to be a professional designer and illustrator, and I certainly don't feel professional. And I think I had to kick it up a notch in class, and I started working a lot harder when I realized that this is going to be how I earn my living and how I eat. So
yeah, I don't think you're alone in that. I think a lot of people go through that. I certainly did, and it wasn't until a decent amount after college that I kind of figured out, how I was going to apply, the last 4 years of my life to the future.
Yeah, no, I think artists are notorious for not being forward thinking. So it's yeah, I think it happens to a lot of us.
Yeah, I know my brain definitely tends to float off to not the
Yeah,
most.
I like, I guess psychologists talk about like your future self, and well, I don't know if it's psychologists. The way I see it is like I have current Steven and then I have future Steven, and future Steven has to deal with all the stuff that current Steven does, and I'm a jerk to future Steven. I'm not nice to him at all, and so yeah, I'm really bad at planning for the future and being nice to my future self.
Yeah, if I could go back and talk to 20-year-old Garrett, I'd probably just shake him violently.
Yeah. No, and
So.
yeah, I see like animes with like time travel or movies with time travel, and I think, yeah, those really connect with me because like I really would like to go back to my past self and just tell them draw more, or I don't know. I think to get to the point where you can be successful as an artist, it just takes years and years of really hard work, and there's nothing for it. You just have to practice, and so and I think how much better could I have been now, and I see all these like punk kids that are 18, 20 that can draw way better than I probably ever will, and I'm pretty jealous. But yeah, it's a struggle.
Yeah, it's one of my rules that I'm always breaking, which is don't compare yourself to people on the internet, because there's always someone better than you and probably way younger.
Yeah.
So use the internet for inspiration, not to beat yourself up. But well, let's talk about how you got past that panic attack and how you kind of applied it and built your first business. At what point did you decide you were going to open up an online store for graphic tees and art prints? What led you to that?
Well, I was, I think, in my second senior year, and I was about to graduate. And it was during the summer, and I didn't have a job, and I wasn't taking summer school or anything. I was just trying to earn some money for the next semester. And my brother sent me a link to a website called Shirt Woot, and he said, "Hey, they have this weekly contest. If you win it, you get $1,000." And so I started submitting designs every week, and I didn't even have a computer. I would just go to the computer lab. There's Jacobs Hall here on campus, and I would just use their computers to design, and I'd hand draw everything, and I'd scan it. And I submitted to that website for about a year. I think I have like, once a week, so whatever the math is on that. And I didn't win, but I learned a lot of lessons about how to like read an audience and interact with an audience and be responsive to their needs and their wants. And eventually I won. And then I started to win more consistently, and just because I think I figured out the audience and the medium of shirt design. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around. It's something that people wear on their shirt, on their chest. There's like an implicit endorsement of whatever they're wearing, so they have to like it, and it also has to be fashionable, because if it looks ugly, then nobody wants to wear it. Remember, I did a drawing once of it was called 4 Men and a Baby, and it was the founding fathers for some reason, like Abraham Lincoln, and I guess he's not a founding father, and George Washington, and they're like holding a baby, and I had an artist friend that told me it's a really good drawing, but nobody wants 4 old dudes on a shirt, and I was like, oh yeah, because you have to think about the people. They have to want to endorse it, but then they also have to look good in it. So it's kind of a hard balancing act. But I got semi good at it, and I started winning more on Shirt Woot, and I started getting like less happy with my day job and making more at Woot. So I decided to go down to part time, and then eventually I quit. But towards this is about a year and a half ago. I got a call, or rather an email, from one of my co-submitters to Woot. And here's a guy named Rami Batty, and he was just kind of the king of Woot, and he got so many prints and everything. And he was just, rolling in the money. But he sent me an email saying, "Hey, do you want to come out to be my illustrator? I have this new website, and you can be my illustrator." And I'm like, "You're going to be..." It was pretty good deal. And I went out and met him in St. Louis, and but the gears in my head had been turning. This guy came from the same place as me. He was a woot artist. He had some success, and then he decided to build something on his own. Those gears had been turning in my head, and meeting with him kind of catalyzed it. And I decided I'm going to do this. I don't need him. I have friends that are better artists than me, so we can build something together. And that's kind of where it started. And I had a business venture with them, and it didn't really work out. But and it kind of morphed into Classy Crow. I took some of the stock and inventory, and so it's, for me, Classy Crow is really about, I guess, providing opportunity for myself. Just because as an artist, you're beholden to other people and what other people can provide for you. And I just got tired of that, and I want to be self-sufficient. And I kind of realized that unless I own it, unless it's mine, I'm never going to be self-sufficient. I'm always going to be giving it away to somebody else to make more money off of me than I make off of me. But also that's part of just being an adult. Like, you have to deal with that. But
it is a battle that I feel is fought almost every day. If you work in commercial art in any way, shape, or form, if you're designing logos or shirts or coffee mugs, it doesn't really matter what it is. But that's the battle to fight, right? It's like, well, how much is it worth, this, a lump sum payment versus whatever the people are making on the back end of this?
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, there wouldn't be any money unless they were paying me. So I had a friend once that told me, you have a choice between some money or no money, and some money is always better than no money. But it's kind of, I just hate the status quo that I give something to someone else that's going to make more off of me than I do. And there's a famous story with the creators of Superman. I think they were work for hire illustrators. They came up with Superman, and I don't know how much they sold him for. It was criminal, like $100 or $500. I can't remember how much, but Superman's $1 billion industry now, and I think his family won a lawsuit recently. But it's just sad, because I think artists traditionally aren't very valued, and what they do isn't very valued, even though what they make is very valuable. And so I kind of wanted to create a space for myself where I could, earn money off of myself. And also I want to provide opportunities for other people if at all possible. The thought that I could give someone else a job or help someone else out is like, just work from a place of generosity would be really neat. But
yeah, it's interesting. So you feel like you'd learned a lot doing the whole shirt woot, that kind of having to appeal to a broad audience. I mean, because it's performance in a way, right? Like you said, you had to gauge, you had to learn your audience. What do they like? And you came down to, well, it's, whatever's on the shirt, that's an endorsement. It has to be designed well. And I'm sure I'm sure to a certain degree, depending on your audience, the design could change. You're talking about, no one's going to wear an ugly shirt, but you think about, I was into, punk and metal when I was in high school. You think about like the metal t-shirt design. Typically, the uglier, the more gruesome it is. Yeah. Probably the better. And then so it's interesting, because it's like the art in its own way, is a performance.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's a beauty to a lot of those like death metal shirts. They're all like one color tees, and they're all real, I think, beautifully rendered and everything, and they sit well on the shirt. But you are incredibly right. If you're selling Pokemon shirts to people, they need to be bright, they need to be colorful, they need to be cute. If you're selling death metal shirts to people, they need to be gruesome, they need to be dark.
Extreme.
So you have to really read your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm thinking about your founding fathers T-shirt. I'm like, I'm sure if you were appealing to a crowd that was into weird memes about the founding members of the U.S., that shirt would do well, but maybe not so much on the shirtwood audience.
Yeah, no, it's totally true, and I kind of worry sometimes that Woot has ruined me, because I think I honed my skills as just making things cute, and I hate a lot of the shirts that I would make, but the audience liked them, and I liked I liked making things that would win and that they would like. But yeah, it's you really have to know your audience, and I guess you have to know the niche, and especially because shirts are a form of self-expression. When people wear a shirt, they're endorsing whatever's on that shirt, and so it really needs to be something that they can get behind. Right. So yeah, knowing your audience is of the utmost importance.
Yeah. So looking at Classic Crow, it looks like you're still going down the pop culture the pop culture path. So I'm assuming, since it's your own stuff, this is pop culture that you are yourself interested in, because you focus on sci-fi, video games. I see some anime in there. Doctor Who.
So I think one of the struggles as an artist is if you don't like what you're doing, it's gonna show. I think anytime I recently saw not Days of Future Past, the new X-Men movie, Apocalypse. And one of the criticisms of that was that Jennifer Lawrence just looks like she doesn't want to be in that movie at all. And I kind of agree. It's, if you don't want to do something, then it's going to show. Eventually, I think you can rough it out for a little while, but eventually it's going to show. And I think a lot of art is all about joy and expression. And if you're not joyful, then it's going to, you can produce for a little bit, but you're going to start to falter. So for me, it's a constant struggle to want to create. And part of the way I get around that is I watch a lot of TV. I play a lot of games. I try to get excited about things. I did when I was a little kid. When I was a little kid, I would draw pictures of Batman and Ninja Turtles, and it wasn't because I thought I could make money off of it, or because I don't know. It was just for me. It's because I liked Ninja Turtles, and I think you start to lose that as an adult when you become too conscious of an audience. You start molding yourself to exactly their preferences, and you start to die inside, and you start to not be productive. You can't keep up like that. So part of being an artist is figuring out what it is that makes you tick, what gets you excited. And I love video games, and I love anime, and I love sci-fi, and so it's just trying to be productive is kind of what shapes my catalog.
Well, it seems like it's a natural progression too. It's not a bad thing to kind of plant your flag in, because clearly if it's something, if you open yourself up and you let yourself kind of not lose that childhood enjoyment of whatever it is that you really enjoy, chances are there's an audience. There's someone more than just you are that passionate about that product, so they would be interested in your illustrations, your prints, your t-shirts.
Yeah, well, and that's really it's an interesting thought, because I feel like I spend most of my time assuming that nobody likes what I like, and I need to change to be accepted. But I guess the beauty of the internet age is that whatever you're into, there's probably a community of that somewhere, and you just need to figure out how to find it. That
has been the interesting thing, I feel, of the last decade just in general, because someone like me who was made fun of when they were younger for being a fan of Star Wars, being a fan of Spider-Man, now those are the things that are ranking in billions of dollars.
Yeah, no, it's because there were a lot of us. We were a silent majority.
Yeah, exactly, and I think part of that was the advent of internet communities. As you realize, oh no, I'm not the only person who obsessed over Ocarina of Time.
I love Ocarina of
Time. I couldn't tell by some of your pieces on your website. No, that's the interesting thing, right? So that's it's always interesting talking with other folks running their own business on this podcast, and how to best utilize the internet, because it's very easy to fall into the trap of it and almost get nothing done because you spend too much time on it. But there, in other ways, it's such a fantastic tool. It's just everything is, you're walking a line on everything, no matter, it feels like, what your project is, what your product is. But there's definitely ways to make the internet work for you, and there's definitely ways to let it cannibalize more hours than you probably should.
Yeah, well, and because one of the things I'm dealing with right now is I spend a lot of my time trying to be a better artist. I draw a lot. I study anatomy. I study animals. I spend a lot of time drawing. And to be a good artist, you have to. You have to draw every day. But the skill set to be like a successful entrepreneur doesn't necessarily line up with the skill set of being a good artist. And so it's hard to like balance those two. And I think managing a business on the internet, you have to be, I don't know, it's a tricky thing, and you have to know about like search engine optimization, and you have to know about like, I don't know, it's there's just a lot of technical things that if you don't do right, then you're gonna fail. And I think it's hard for probably just they call them, what are those? I can't remember. Whatever. So just basically artisans, people that, you know, bakers or whatever. They get into entrepreneurship because they can bake, and they can bake really well, but then they fail because they don't know business, and online business adds another layer of complexity onto that.
Yeah, it can in a way almost, you know, because you said, you know, you were in an engineering class and you weren't really connecting with the gearheads, and in a way it's part of that mentality can come into running an online business, because you have to figure out how SEO works, how to build your website, how to, you know, how to manage order fulfillment and that type of stuff. But and that's me personally. I struggle with a lot of that as well. That's where I started getting in. That's where I found the importance of networking, of talking with other peers in your circle, you know, in that are in a shared space. So you can go and talk to them. It's like, well, okay, I know you're a creative person. You probably struggle with the same things. How did you make your business work? And that's how I learned a lot of my tricks, was just talking to my peers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, just the secret of motivation. I don't think little kids learn how to program because they love equations and long lines of code. It's because they want to do something. And so I think if you can rewire your brain to, I want to make art, and this is what I have to do it, then it gets a lot easier. And once you understand, once you have the proper motivation, but it's still hard to, because there's so much in-depth knowledge that you have to acquire. And so, yeah, I agree. I love talking to other people, and I love being part of a community with other people, because it's hard to do it alone.
Yeah. So what tips would you give? You've built a successful, you know, online store. I've seen your website; it's very nice. It functions great. What advice would you give to anyone out there who is trying to start their first online store?
So I'm a designer, and because of that, I really wanted a lot of control over how my site looked. And I'd explored sites like Big Cartel and Squarespace before, and I decided against it. Just for one, they didn't really provide me the amount of control that I wanted, and two, I thought they're kind of cookie cutter, and no one's going to respect me as a brand if it's, you know, classycrow.bigcartel.com. And so I went out and I signed up for lynda.com, not a sponsor, and I learned CSS and HTML, and then I got what's the other, WordPress. Sorry, I got a WordPress site, and I don't know, it was a whole big ordeal, and I hated every moment of it. So I would suggest just go with Big Cartel or go with Squarespace. Those sites are. I've seen a lot of legitimate artists with a Big Cartel site. They don't even bother with purchasing the URL without Big Cartel in it. If you pay more, you don't have to have their name in your URL. And I've seen a lot of artists that just leave it in there. And I don't know. I think maybe focus on the art and less on does your site look exactly professional? I don't know. It's a hard line to draw, because I really wanted to differentiate myself somehow and be different. But I also just wasted a lot of energy fighting with something I'm not good at, which is programming. So I would I would say just go with another service. They're super cheap, and I ended up spending up a lot more because I bought hosting with someone else, and I bought my URL with someone else, and it starts to add up. So I would explore like Squarespace or Big Cartel. There's some good services out there if you want to build a site.
Yeah, I personally use Squarespace and I enjoy them. But yeah, and I wouldn't sell yourself short though, because I'm sure there are people in the exact same boat, and I think the end game though is how do you feel afterwards? And it sounds like for you after the fact you realize this is not something I want to dedicate hours to.
Yeah, because you have to troubleshoot. You have to update your. I'm having to update multiple things like my theme, and then also it's there's a level of maintenance that I wouldn't have to deal with if I just went with another service, and yeah, it's do what you do best and figure out how you can get other people to do the other things, if all possible.
That is definitely where my brain is at as well. It's like, well, I only have so many hours in the day to dedicate to whatever it is. So you have to choose where you're basically, it's a resource where you're allocating those resources.
Choose your battles.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I think you can build a perfectly fine website with some of these stock things. But I also, if you enjoy web design, if it's something you're efficient at, I wouldn't necessarily discourage you from making your own custom website. It's definitely not. It's definitely not for me, and it doesn't sound like it was. It was your cup of tea either.
No, but if you can learn, if you have the mind to do CSS and HTML, then a lot of times I feel like I'm half of an equation. I used to work for New Mexico State University making games like apps and Flash games, but I can't program. I don't know ActionScript. I don't know whatever the language is in iOS. I can't do any of that stuff. And so a lot of times I feel like I'm half of a cash cow. I can draw things. I can come up with a game. I can do sprites. I can make animations. I just can't program. And so like I'm dead in the water. And so like if I could do those things, then I could make an app. I could do lots of stuff. And so if you can do it, then like you're going to be primed for success. But then don't beat yourself up if you can't, because you really all being a successful person or human being is figuring out what am I good at and what can I most excel at and what am I bad at and should I just kind of leave up to other people. And so yeah, I would suggest if you can learn, then you can, as an artist, that's going to really open up a lot of avenues for you.
Yeah, I call it the battle of efficiency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No. Yeah. If there's just things that you're not good at, and that's part of growing up is realizing that I'm not going to be a football player, so I shouldn't try.
Yeah. So I'm gonna pull up some of your art right now, so folks can get a look at some of your pieces. So this is where Classy Crow is now. You're selling art, you're selling prints. You have some really phenomenal T-shirt designs available on the website. I'd highly recommend folks, if you are into nerd culture, check out classycrow.com. But where do you see it in the future? What are your future goals as an artist and as a business owner?
So one of my dreams is, if you notice, there's like Castlevania in the center, Doctor Who to the left, Zelda to the right. I kind of like toe the line between just these. They're inspired by things, but like I don't think anyone could sue me for them. But I really just I love video games. And I love these IPs. I love Zelda. I love Castlevania. So one of my dreams is to like do an actual licensed piece for one of these franchises. There's one site, it's called Mondo. I think it's mondoprints.com or Mondo, but they do limited edition screen prints of movies and shows and games and stuff. And so one of my dreams is I would love to kind of be endorsed by one of them and make an official piece of Zelda art or Castlevania art. And I know people do it, and so I'd like to figure out how to do that. So yeah, and I just love the idea that I would be accepted by them.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I see more and more of that nowadays, and even it's funny as an artist. I remember, used to, follow along online to different art exhibits that were happening. A lot of times they happen in Southern California. At certain museums for whatever, anything you can think of. Zelda. I've seen Zelda art exhibits, Breaking Bad, Game of Thrones, and those show up on those. You can buy prints of the pieces that show up, and it's exactly this. It's just. It's all these different artists' interpretations of these fictions.
Yeah, I would love to get involved in that. And I know that I've been looking into licensing, and I think it's a whole beast. And you have to be able to, for some of the bigger IPs, you have to give proof that I can sell millions of units, and so it's not a game for small fish. But there are those art exhibits, and I've seen them before, and they have basically an open call at any Star Wars fan art. We'd love to have it, and so I need to start submitting to those a bit more.
Yeah, I think I think it's that balancing act, and it's a legal gray area when you're talking about creating art with other existing intellectual property. But I think more and more companies out there are realizing that this is a benefit, that by not cracking down, by not pushing against these type of movement, that it's in their best interest. They're being positive towards their most passionate portions of their community, and at the same time, it's advertising that they're not having to dedicate man hours to.
Well, and it's a good way to just invigorate your franchise with, I don't know, just like street level hipness. If I can get some street artists to do a Game of Thrones, I guess they don't probably need much help, but you can invigorate a franchise with fresh blood and new excitement. And I think a lot of companies are starting to understand the value of a cult following and fostering that atmosphere of like rabid fandom, and I think encouraging artists is a good way to do that. There was recently I can't remember the name of the movie, but there's a Star Trek fan film that some guys were making, and I think they got Kickstarter support, and it was in the millions, and they're making this fan film, and Paramount said, no, you don't, and they were suing them, and it was a big ordeal. And I saw recently that they may have dropped it just because it's just bad for them, just to attack their fans. But yeah, it's an interesting area, like fan art.
Yeah, there's definitely there seems to be a critical mass issue. If you get too big, you will get noticed by legal departments.
Yeah.
If you keep it more grassroots, more on the artisanal level, it seems to be almost encouraged.
Yeah, it's weird because I go to comic conventions and I have booths, and a lot of like the artists just have a drawing of Superman or Batman, and somehow they get away with it. And I think it just has to do, they don't want to insult their fans, and they tolerate a certain level of I guess profiting off of their intellectual property. And if you got too big, then they'd hit you with a cease and desist. But yeah, I don't think they cared too much about the small guys, which is nice.
Yeah, it's an interesting space. It's almost like you need to, if you're into this type of thing, you need to keep an eye on each corporate entity and see how they kind of treat their fans, because some definitely are way more encouraging of artist interpretations than others.
Well, and I don't know. So on Shirt Woot, they do a lot of parody shirts, and so it's not licensed or anything. But for a while, like that wasn't my first. A lot of my shirts are Lord of the Rings inspired because I love Lord of the Rings. But it was about a year ago, overnight, all of their Lord of the Rings shirts disappeared off of the site. And I'm assuming that they got a cease and desist from whoever owns, I guess that's not, oh, well, it doesn't. I'm trying to remember the studio that owns
New Line
Cinema. So I'm sure they got a cease and desist from New Line Cinema. But then there's just Doctor Who shirts abound on Wooten and everywhere.
The Doctor Who
seems
shirt.
like even, oddly enough, Star Wars too. There's tons of just Star Wars influenced designs. So some companies are cool about it, and others are real protective, and they have a right to be. But it's neat whenever they encourage, grassroots art, and
yeah, I like seeing it because, I mean, we've been mentioning Game of Thrones a few times. Game of Thrones is only on TV for 10 weeks out of the year. Every other week of the year, I'm staying interested because of things like fan art and podcasts and articles and interviews with the cast. That's the stuff that keeps me involved.
Yeah, after the season finale last season, I went and I bought all the books, and I read them all in a matter of about a couple months because I was just so hungry for more. And then I should have paced myself because there was a few months where I just had nothing, and I was just sitting on that cliffhanger, and I'd watch YouTube videos about it, and people are hungry for that.
Yeah.
And a lot of, and two, if I own a franchise, if I'm a showrunner or whatever, I can't produce a show for an entire year. Like, there's seasons and there's season breaks. And so if you can generate buzz and interest if you allow people to do things like that, and it'll carry people over, and keep them interested. So and if you quash all that, then you can kind of kill the excitement that builds up to the next season.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Stephen, it's been wonderful talking with you. Thank you for your time. If folks want to keep up with you and Classic Crow, where can they go?
They can go to classiccrow.com. I have Instagram. I have a Tumblr. You can also follow me personally. I have a Instagram. It's Radscoolian, RADSCOOLIAN. It's a horrible name, I know.
I think it's kind of awesome, personally.
Yeah, but it's just if you have to repeat it 2 or 3 times, or if you have to spell it, then you probably should reconsider your name. But and then also I have a personal blog or a personal website, stephenjdye.com. And I try and post to Instagram fairly regularly, and and I'm always making new shirts.
Well, that's great. Well, I really love your work, so I highly recommend everyone listening, everyone watching on YouTube, definitely check out classiccrow.com. Thank you again, Stephen.
Yeah,
and
thank you
everyone who's listening or watching on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe, and we will see you next time.